Thank you. I call to order the regular meeting of Marin Wildfire Board of Directors of May 16, 2024. Josh, could you please call the roll to ensure that we have a quorum of the board present?
At this time, I would like us to inform the board that Director Paulson of Larkspur has joined us from a meeting location pursuant to the Brown Act. Specifically, childcare has posed an unexpected barrier to in-person participation this afternoon, which qualifies as a just cause reason under the Brown Act as amended by AB 2449. Director Paulson, please confirm that no one over the age of 18 is present in the room with you.
That is true.
And now on to the roll call. Fairfax?
Here.
Kentfield?
Here.
Marinwood?
Here.
Corte Madera?
Here.
Novato?
Here.
Southern Marin?
Here.
Bolinas?
Here.
County Marin? Larkspur?
Here.
San Rafael?
Here.
Ross?
Here.
Inverness? Muir Beach? Stinson Beach?
Here.
Mill Valley? San Anselmo?
Here.
Sleepy Hollow?
Here.
Could you please call County of Marin again?
County Marin? That's a here.
Great. And I just want people to realize that because we have someone online, we will need to take roll call for each motion. Are there any agenda adjustments?
Yes, President McMillan, staff would like to pull item or remove item 6D from the agenda so that we could revise the proposal or the process that is in the proposal of that staff report.
6D, the designation of staff to execute task orders is pulled.
Correct. We would like to remove it for this meeting and bring it back in June.
Thank you. Do I need a motion for that?
You can just amend by saying you're voting, when you do the vote on the consent agenda, you can just vote to have the, that one eliminated as part of that motion.
Great. Number 4, open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Board of Directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to the Government Code Section 54954.2, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your microphone when not reporting out. Josh, is there any public comment?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Number 5, Executive Officers Report, Mark Brown.
Good afternoon, board members. Sorry about my absence, but I'm here with you remotely and we'll start sharing my screen now. As typical for this time of year, a lot of people are wondering how things are going to look for the fire season. Looking at the fuels, looking at the type of weather that we had during the winter, I was able to pull up this 4-month prediction, and you can see for May, the chances of a large catastrophic fire are normal, but remember, typically May, we didn't have much of a chance anyway, so normal is really low. For June and July, they're predicting below normal chances of catastrophic fires. And then when we get back into August, we're seeing that we would get back into a normal phase of being able to have catastrophic fires. And I would imagine we have a good chance of getting to above normal chances once we get into September and October. Looking at our live fuel moistures, they're tracking along pretty historic trends, as are our dead fuel moistures. They're pretty much tracking along normal trends. For insurance, we know that that continues to be a huge topic, not just in Marin County, but all over the state of California. At our at our June meeting, or potentially our July meeting, we will be presenting a full report to the board and executive committee, as well as the operations committee, the actions that we have been taking both at the policy levels and also at the technical and modeling levels, so that the type of work that we are doing becomes legible to the insurance industry, and they see that perhaps this type of work is making California a place they want to continue to insure in. We've had a lot of media lately. Bell Cole and Ann Krelock had an awesome Marin Voice not too long ago. There was another Marin Voice just a couple days ago, talk about wildfire preparedness. That Marin Wildfire was highlighted quite well in it. A couple of letters to the editor, quite supportive of our work. And then we also had an episode of Open Roads where the Fire Foundry was highlighted in Open Roads with Doug McConnell's Open Roads. And Marin Wildfire will be highlighted on Open Roads here at the end of May. And in partnership with Fire Safe Marin, we published or produced and distributed a evacuation video, making it downhill alive. As of this morning, we already had 3,700 views, and we have a deal with CAL FIRE. They're going to help us get the word out on this video. We've created 3 one-minute little snippets of some of the most important parts of that video, and we think that'll entice other people to either see those really important snippets or hopefully get them to watch the whole thing. On the conference front, we've been pretty busy. And again, we're doing this so that we can help other areas of the state adopt the type of model that we have and get the pace and scale of the work that we're performing across the state. And we feel that that is going to help with the insurance crisis across California, because we need just more than Marin getting work like this done. We need the entire state getting work like this done. As you can see in the picture, Ann and our team went to the Wild and Urban Interface Conference in Reno, and Ann presented with Chief Tyler, went really well, and also presented with Panorama at the Association of Environmental Planners. Again, that went really well. And then I had an opportunity to present at a wildfire technology conference where we described our process of dynamic risk assessment for both on-property and our shaded fuel breaks. Some really exciting news is that we're going to be able to host Daniel Swain from UCLA. And basically, if there's any significant weather event, he's quoted all over the media. He's very good at what he does, and what he really does well is he makes complicated topics easy to understand. So we're really looking forward to July 10th at 12 o'clock, hosted at the Marin Wildfire board chambers, right where you guys are. And then finally, I would like to turn off my screen share so that we can have our new senior wildfire mitigation specialists introduce themselves to you. We have Kathleen Cutter, and David Glenn is participating with us remotely. Kathleen, why don't you start us off?
Me in the room, and I've already messed up. So I'm Kathleen Cutter. I've been running the Defensible Space Program since 2021. So it started off with the 4 fire agencies. I don't really know what you want me to say, except I'm here to continue the work I've been doing. We've already gotten 1,000 inspections under our belt with 7 inspectors. We have an 8th one returning today. We'll have 2 more returnees. So we're already starting really strong this year. Really excited about it. Dialing in inspections, asking more of them, asking the caliber to be brought up of the inspections. Really looking forward to this year. We're going to have a full fleet of 29 inspectors this year, and we'll be, Southern Marin all the way up to everybody, everywhere except for Novato and the city of Santa Fe, and of course, Belvedere and Tiburon. It's a little shorter saying it that way. That's it. All right.
Thank you, Kathleen. Dave?
Okay. Can you hear me?
We got you.
All right, great. Yeah, my name is David Glenn. I got hired on as a senior wildfire mitigation specialist, currently working as battalion chief for Kentfield Fire and Central Marin Fire Department. I've been with Kentfield for 33 years. Total, I've been a training officer for 20 years, and I felt that it was time for me to move on from the fire operational side and move into the prevention side. So I'm really looking forward to working with all of you, and I'm excited to start in a new adventure in my career.
Thank you, Dave. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions from the board? Welcome, Dave and Kathleen. Any public comments?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. I'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion. I'll just note that David Glenn's children and my children were at Ross Valley Nursery School together. How many decades ago was that? Eons.
That was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Welcome.
Thank you.
Number 6, the consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action, and the alternative items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board or staff member for separate discussion and vote. So please note that we have deleted item D on the consent calendar. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
No hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Do any board members wish to pull an item from the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to move items 6, A, B, and C.
Thank you,
on
Barbara.
consent.
Is there a second? I'm sorry, who seconded it? Barry? Thank you. Can we please call the roll?
Fairfax,
Yes.
Kentfield, Renwood,
Aye.
Corte Madera,
Yes.
Novato,
Aye.
Southern Marin,
Aye.
Bolinas, County Marin,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
San Rafael,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Stinson Beach,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow.
Aye.
Number 7, action items, the draft fiscal year 2024-2025 Marin Wildfire Work Plan. Anne.
Thank you. So we will dive right in. This item is a really long time coming. A lot of folks put a lot of effort into this work plan. I want to start off by thanking our advisory technical committee and our operations committee, our voting and non-voting members of the advisory technical committee who've been very engaged this entire time. A lot of staff hours went into this work as well. So a big thank you to everyone. So what we're going to do today is run through a status report to show you what the process was and the milestones for developing this draft work plan for you to consider today. We'll review at a very high level what proposals are included in this work plan. And really what I'm going to do is highlight the things that are new rather than go into detail into proposals that you've seen in previous work plans. We'll talk a little bit about next steps. There will be time for discussion, and then it's time to make some decisions. And then Mark will be addressing the budget in more detail in his item. So you've seen this slide before. There are some additional details added just for the sake of tracking how many meetings we have had on this topic. We started work really in November, updating the work plan portal. That's the digital online tool that we use. Member agencies and staff can upload their project proposals into this database. That's how we're tracking it. So we started that in November. The advisory technical committee and operations committees both started meeting in December. In January, we elected a chair and vice chair to both of those committees. We met, each committee met once. We also invited land management agencies to discuss how best to coordinate with them for any future projects and make sure that our ideas are getting incorporated into their internal planning processes. We also discussed overall approach and strategy for this year's work plan, and I'll go into that in a future slide. In February and March, that was a busy time because member agencies really dove into submitting proposals into the work plan portal. We had a deadline of March 1st for the initial JPA-wide proposals, and that's because those JPA-wide proposals really affect the core budget. And we wanted to make sure that member agencies had a clear idea for what their potential budgets might be for the season. We also saw the CPI release March 12th, and this board took action on that and increased the revenue by 2.4%. So we incorporated that into the budgeting. Mid-March, we set a deadline for initial drafts of proposals due so that we could get an idea for what was coming. And the end of March was the deadline for really kind of pencils down. Let's have a good idea for what's coming this next year. The ad hoc subcommittees of each of those, the Advisory Technical Committee and Operations Committee, really dove into the details for all of these proposals, had a lot of conversations about them. I'll go into that in another slide. In April, we dove into budgeting and really thinking through how many dollars should go to each proposal, how to divvy that up. A lot of conversations there, and I'll go into that in future slides. And then now we're in May. The Operations Committee decided on May 2nd to go ahead and recommend the suite of proposals for board consideration. The Finance Committee met on May 6th, and now we are at May 16th and meeting with our board. So all in all, that's a lot of meetings, a lot of public meetings, 6 meetings of the full ATC, 6 meetings of the full Operations Committee. We also discussed with environmental stakeholders during monthly meetings. We also updated the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership during their monthly meetings, discussed at the Finance Committee meeting, and then all of those proposals have been publicly available online on our website since March. So a lot of opportunity thus far to dive in and provide public comment, etc. I wanted to share what the Operations Committee envisioned for this year. The Operations Committee a couple of years ago developed some overall kind of strategic guidance for the work plan. And this last year, they decided to dive in a little more and provide some additional detail. So it's very consistent with what you've seen before, but with some additional talking points here. Of course, continuing the house out approach, that's really fundamental to everything that we're doing. But also continuing to reduce wildfire risk to communities by providing resources directly to residents for home hardening and defensible space activities. That's, grants to residents, direct assistance to residents to make their homes and their yards more ember resistant. Prioritizing shaded fuel breaks directly adjacent to communities and exploring the potential for SPLATs, strategically placed local or landscape area treatments. And that would be informed by modeling through, as Bruce has mentioned previously, pathways modeling, and we're going to be diving into that this year as well. Expanding the use of prescribed fire and public education and involvement around beneficial fire. And that's a big one that we see more and more opportunities. Continuing to prioritize evacuation planning and projects to improve safe and efficient evacuations. As you know, that has been a big focus for our work plans in previous years, and that'll continue. Partnering with insurance companies and the IBHS to help avoid insurance cancellations and control costs for homeowners. That is something that Mark has spoken to on a number of occasions and will continue in that vein. Increasing public education, particularly to new audiences, supporting activities that both fire agencies and residents can take on. Home hardening, defensible space, really emphasizing that zone 0 evacuation planning, and then also reducing human cause ignitions. So these are things that we've had as part of our public education in the past, and we'll continue to emphasize all of that in the future. I want to highlight those folks who've been taking part in the ATC ad hoc subcommittee and the operations ad hoc subcommittee. The ATC ad hoc subcommittee included Fred Hilliard, Jordan Reeser, Larry Passero, Lynn Osgood, Quinn Gardner, Robert Bastion, Ruben Martin, and Todd Lando. Met on a number of occasions. Here are some highlights. March 21st, we discussed the JPA-wide proposals and really dug into what has been submitted thus far. On April 11th, dug into the zone-specific proposals and the member agency proposals that had been submitted. And then on April 23rd, discussing that 20% priority funding. So as you know, 80% of the revenue spent generated in each zone needs to be spent in those zones, averaged over 5 years. And so that does provide some opportunity for some flexibility to think JPA wide with that extra 20% funding. So we asked member agencies to budget to 80% of core, and then maybe think through that extra 20% creatively together to think through if there were some projects or programs that really stood out. The Operations Ad Hoc Subcommittee included Bill Tyler, Chris Tubbs, Dan Mahoney, Jason Weber, John Stefanski, and Todd Cusimano, met on a number of occasions as well, including March 22nd to discuss JPI-wide proposals, April 16th, zone-specific proposals, the 23rd to really dive into that 20% priority funding, as I mentioned, and then again on the 29th to circle back to that topic and make some decisions. There were some really great conversations during the ad hoc subcommittees, and those were reported out to the full committees. Nobody from either the ATC or the operations committee, the chair or vice chair of either committee, could join us today because there is a Marin County Fire Chiefs retreat today. So nobody was able to join us today. So Chief Tyler and Chief Martin, I hope, let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to convey to the board after the fact. So now I'd like to jump into what the board adopted goals are that we address in our proposals. So we've got 5 goals, as you know. The first is regarding vegetation management for fire risk reduction. The second, detection, alert, and evacuations. The third is really focused on grants and partnerships, but mostly grants for home hardening and defensible space. Number 4, public outreach and education. And number 5, defensible space and home hardening. To highlight a few of the things that are different this year, that are new this year, in terms of the JPA-wide proposals, and you can keep these in mind as I go through the tables in the next slides, rather than going into detail in terms of all of the proposals that you've already seen previously, some of the new ones this year. JPA-wide, we had a new proposal from vegetation management specialists from around the JPA that was included in the JPA-wide proposals. We really supported having staff come to us with a JPA-wide proposal of something that they thought was really important and critical to the entire JPA. And this was building on some work that Novato had already done regarding fire roads and taking an inventory of fire roads and looking at their condition and what changes and upgrades might be needed, particularly vegetation management. But this fire road assessment is included in the JPA-wide proposals. In Central Marin, we've got Camp Tamarancho. This is Marin County Fire's collaboration with the Community Development Agency and others, and the Boy Scout camp there. That is about 410 acres northwest of Fairfax. This is a Boy Scout camp where campers and residents and neighbors would be vulnerable during a wildfire. And so there is work proposed in this area. It's already been covered under CEQA. Marin County Fire worked with the Community Development Agency to cover it under the CalVTP, the California Vegetation Treatment Program. So CEQA is done for that. We also have some work in West Marin, including some fire road improvements, some of that on national park land, some public education materials, et cetera, in Stinson Beach. In Novato Zone, the new proposal is work in Zone 0. So really pushing Zone 0 work for residents and supporting residents in that effort. In San Rafael, we've got some additional targeted assistance for residents, a new fuel reduction area in the Deer Valley area, and we're working on the CEQA for that coming up soon, and some educational landscaping in Marinwood. We saw a few educational landscaping proposals this year. Southern Marin Zone had several new proposals, including a new fire safe garden, a shaded fuel break next to homes in the Strawberry Alto area, and a new direct assistance program, some red flag warning signs, and additional emergency notification. So that's a summary of really what's new in the tables that you're about to see. So in the JPA-wide proposals, this is quite similar to last year. I've got a column here to show what proposals are new or continued. So you'll see only one new proposal here. Some of the names have changed a little bit. These science-based tools and studies, the evacuation work that STI has been doing, the shaded fuel break modeling, those science-based tools are all kind of lumped in together in the data-driven wildfire risk framework, that number 5 in the before we put too many dollars towards direct assistance. That program includes direct assistance and reimbursement for home hardening and defensible space. And the Chipper Day program has grown. There is a huge demand for that service. And so that budget has increased a little bit this year as well. And I'm happy to answer questions in the future about any of these proposals. Each of these tables includes kind of a designation of goals 1 through 5 and where these proposals fall in terms of which goal they're implementing. So for example, operational costs really implements all 5 goals, but environmental compliance, that's really focused on vegetation management because that's really where we need CEQA. Some of the different goals are addressed, or some of the proposals address multiple goals. So I've noted that in some of the slides. Here's a breakdown, goals 1 through 5 for JPA-wide proposals, where the dollars are going. Goal 1, vegetation management, is around 16% of the JPA-wide budget. So that's a lot of the environmental compliance, et cetera. Detection, alert, and evacuation, that's 10%. Goal 3, grants for home hardening and defensible space, that's 18%. Public education, 22%. And goal 5, de-space and home hardening, that's 34%. You can see a lot of these goals really address similar topics, and we will revisit that idea later on. So in terms of Central Marin proposals, I've got 2 slides here. There are a lot of entities in Central Marin, so I've got 2 slides and a lot of rows. You don't need to memorize every project in this table. A lot of these are repeats of last year because Central Marin has really divvied up for each of the agencies invasive vegetation treatment, defensible space abatement program, inspection and evaluation program, et cetera. And I've indicated which goal these items address specifically. And then we've got a tally up here at the end of how much is allocated to each goal. And then I'm noting in some of these slides where a program addresses more than one goal. So for example, the evacuation route work in Central Marin is tallied up under goal 1, but it also addresses evacuations. So I've noted that in the table. So here's a breakdown of the Central Marin proposals in terms of which goals they address. And just note, as you take a look at this, that some projects and proposals and programs address more than one goal, but we had to choose one. In West Marin, very similar. Most of these projects and programs are continued. Some of the new ones include some additional vegetation management and Bolinas. The Stinson Beach proposals that I mentioned earlier. And this is a breakdown generally of how the proposals fall in terms of the goals, although there is, of course, overlap between vegetation management and evacuation. In Novato, there are a lot of proposals that address more than one goal, so I've indicated those as well. And this is a breakdown of how the proposals fall in terms of which goals they are addressing. So there's a lot of work going on in Novato in terms of vegetation management, Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break, for example. And so you'll see goal 1 hitting more than half of the budget. And I'll note too that the roadside evacuation vegetation management is falling under goal 1. So you're seeing that in green rather than in orange. In San Rafael, this includes San Rafael and Marinwood. There are a few proposals here that address more than one goal. So for example, the targeted assistance is listed under goal 3, grants, DSpace and home hardening, but also addresses goal 5 of DSpace and home hardening. And this is how San Rafael's work breaks down in terms of goals. So vegetation management is a significant portion of their proposed budget, and that's because they have a lot of shaded fuel breaks and roadside vegetation management in play, including the San Rafael San Anselmo Fuel Reduction Zone. In Southern Marin, there are a lot of proposals here, so 2 different slides. Southern Marin had a lot of new proposals, as I mentioned earlier. And there are several that address more than one goal, for example, vegetation management and evacuations. And this is how the proposals break down in terms of goals. So if we take a look at the budget as a whole, this is how it breaks down in terms of goals. Goal 1, vegetation management for the entirety of the Marin Wildfire 24-25 budget. It's about 41%. Detection, alerts, and evacuation, about 9%. Grants for home hardening and DSpace, that's about 12%. Public education, 11%. And goal 5, DSpace, home hardening, a lot of inspections, et cetera, that's about 27%. So I wanted to also explore how the budget breaks down in terms of shaded fuel breaks and non-shaded fuel break activities, really in response to some of the public comment that we received that's attached to the board agenda, and making sure that we really are living up to our commitment to a house-out approach. So as you know, taking a house-out approach is really fundamental to what we do. So we do a lot of inspections, a lot of grants for home hardening and defensible space. We work from the house out and work on evacuation planning and vegetation management along key evacuation routes to make sure that people are getting out efficiently and first responders can get in. And so I took a look at the proposals and grouped them in terms of whether or not they were part of kind of alerts and evacuations, home hardening, defensible space, and public education, because public education really revolves around getting our residents informed and able to evacuate and take care of their home hardening and DSpace. And then versus those shaded fuel breaks, the vegetation management that's taking place adjacent to communities and in San Rafael in kind of a splat setting. So although the shaded fuel breaks, I think it would be fair to say that many of those are really expanded defensible space zones around our communities and directly behind the back fences of homes. But nevertheless, I wanted to see how that worked out in terms of funding. So it looks like about 69% of our funding of our 24-25 budget is really going to be going towards those homes, alerts and evacuations, home hardening and defensible space, and public education. And then around 31% is going towards shaded fuel breaks and that other type of vegetation management, in addition to the services needed to support that. So the environmental compliance, vegetation management, staff, equipment, things like that. So that's a very broad overview of the work plan and the proposals in the work plan. And all of those are available. All the proposals are available in the work plan or in the agenda, and they've been available online as well. The plans for staff right now include finalizing that document, assuming the board supports this document, working on formatting, checking for typos, making sure that all the attestations have all their last names, things like that, really buttoning up that document. We're hoping to create an executive summary and post that and maybe print some hard copies if you'd like them in June and things like that. And then our work doesn't stop there. We really want to work on getting ready for next fiscal year's work plan. So during the, quote unquote off season, at least for work plan development, we'll be working with staff from the different member agencies to really dive into our science-based data-driven tools. We've got all these resources that we're developing, that we're unveiling, more to come because we have some pathways modeling coming up this fall. All of these resources and tools, we'd really like to dive in with our member agency staff and figure out how to best utilize those in the work plan development process. So we'll be convening a staff level working group to really think through that together and come up with some methodology, dive into the tools together, and answer some questions together so that we're ready to really start using that next year when we're developing the work plans. We dove into that a little bit this year and felt like we needed more conversations and more collaboration so that we're really ready to use those for next year. So I'm excited to start that. We'll also be convening the operations committee one more time to talk about potential edits to the JPA language, and then what we're doing to coordinate on insurance related topics. So I want to end by, again, thanking everybody who took part in this process, the ATC, the operations committee, especially the ad hoc subcommittees who worked really hard, responded to a lot of doodle polls, and met with me on a number of occasions to think through all the details. And I think that the work that we're doing here really illustrates how collaboration at this level can create work plans, strategic wildfire risk reduction at the county scale, at the JPA scale, that is way beyond what any individual agency could do. So a big kudos to everybody who contributed to that effort. So now I'd like to invite the board to ask questions. And then for today, this is an action item. So staff recommends that the Marin Wildfire Board of Directors provide feedback, ask questions, and also vote to adopt the attached resolution approving the draft fiscal year 24-25 work plan. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Anne. That was an incredible presentation, and I know it was an incredible amount of work and coordinating, and it's great. Thank you. Questions from the board? Barbara.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for kind of heading this up, and thank everyone for putting it together. And thank you and Mark for responding to my numerous questions I sent beforehand. It helps. I have a few remaining questions and a couple of things. We never spend all the money, which I think is okay, but I'm wondering, there's a work plan, a core work plan that I think Central Marin may have missed. And I'm wondering if there's a possibility of submitting an amended core work plan and not waiting till next fiscal year. Should I ask all my questions or wait for the answers? I have three questions.
Well, regarding a new core project, I'm not sure what the avenue with that would be, because we need to have a approved work plan by June 1st, I believe, and the ATC and Operations Committee would not have reviewed that yet. So Mark, do you have input on that?
I'm just wondering, I think that the board could potentially go ahead and approve this work plan. I'm just, we work on things in all our different lives and all our different boards. We usually are able to amend something subsequent. So I don't think it needs to be tomorrow, and I don't think it needs to be before July 1, but I think subsequent, I just wonder if that's a possibility rather than waiting until next year.
Well, I can address this amount of spending. Actually, last year we spent $2 million more than we received in revenue, and that was by design. We had approximately $4 million of unspent from our second fiscal year as the Marin Wildfire. And we have been purposely spending that down because we don't think we should be holding on to the taxpayers' money. We think we should be putting it to work. And we anticipate doing that once again and pretty much zeroing out that unspent from that second fiscal year. So again, we've been outspending the amount of revenue that we bring in. That means most likely fiscal year 25-26, we're going to have to be a little less ambitious with our plan of work. As far as the adding a core project, especially in Central Marin, that means working with all of the partners within the Central Marin zone, because there's only a finite amount of dollars available for the Central Marin zone, just like every other zone. So there would be a negotiation process with all the other member agencies agreeing to bring down the other core projects. So not impossible, but there is quite a bit of work that would be required.
Okay, well, I wasn't thinking that there would be a need to negotiate people down. I don't want to change what's already gone forward. So I was thinking, was it possible to add? And it sounds like no. Okay, second question, and thank you, Mark. So I'm always sort of diligent on the grants that we have for home hardening and for defensible space for our residents. And I know that that work plan also included the direct assistance. There was language in there that kind of troubled me when we talk about the grants that people would get reimbursement for. That project or that part of our work has been one of the most popular things. And one of the things that worried me is there was language like priority. And, you know, we know that Coffee Park had those homes hardened. They were not in the WUI. You wouldn't necessarily think that they were priority just looking at them. Pretty much all of Coffee Park burned to the ground. So I hate to see us, I don't know, maybe that word priority doesn't mean that much, but I hate to see that we're going to be turning away potential people that want to do D-space, that want to do home hardening, just because they're not in the WUI and somebody decides with their judgment that this is not a priority. It's a popular program that gets us a lot of good feedback. The other part of that question is, I noticed for each of those grants, it was only 266 each. And I know last year we struggled to find some money to augment that. I'm wondering, you know, it is so popular, it has grown. So two parts to that question. I don't want us to be in the situation we were in last year where we had to do all this negotiation to get people to find money. Can we potentially add more money if necessary? But also, can you speak to the idea, are we going to be turning people away because somebody thinks in their judgment it's not a priority? And remember, we probably want to renew this in a couple of years. This may be one of our most popular programs. Thank you, Ann.
I can fix it all. No, I absolutely hear you. I mean, the direct assistance and grant reimbursement programs, the CHIPPR programs where we are interacting with the public directly and providing a benefit and a resource directly to the public. I think those are really important programs. They're points of contact. They're customers who we want to walk away happy. Last year, we did run through the reimbursement dollars very quickly. I think they were gone in 4 months. Very popular program. This includes not only direct assistance, but also reimbursements for home hardening and defensible space that do not include prioritization based on, you know, wildfire risk, et cetera. So those two reimbursement programs will function as kind of the continued customer kind of satisfaction type programs. And then the direct assistance program will reflect the priorities of the different member agencies in terms of wildfire risk, because that was something that the member agencies expressed that they really wanted to dive into areas that they felt were high risk or properties, neighborhoods that they felt were very high risk and high need. So there was a working group from the different member agencies that came up with that idea. Josh Hampshire was intimately involved in that program and the development and kind of coordinating those conversations. And so I think he can speak to that a little bit more. But I absolutely, you know, agree that this was that this is a really important program, and I hope we continue to support it year after year. We did have some concern from some member agencies that they didn't that specifically asked us to reduce the budget from 1.1 million down to 900,000 for this fiscal year.
So I'm a quick follow-up. I'm okay. The direct assistance sounds like a new specialized program. I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is I think we reduced the funding for the reimbursable grants from last year and very popular. So I'm not focusing on the direct assistance. I think that's a new avenue that'll be really helpful for us. But I'm just wondering, I don't want us to be in the position where we say, well, we ran out of money, can't get any more of those reimbursable grants, or we got to go back and have people try to scramble to find some money. Is it possible for us to be thinking about now, where can we bring in additional funds so that, we continue this program that just gets more and more popular? Maybe Mark wants to speak.
Yeah, and we have actually have applied a couple of different times for grants that would be specific to funnel back into our direct assistance and grant program for defensible space and home hardening. So far, we've been unsuccessful with those grants, but we will continue with that as well. We have some other ideas that after we change JPA or pass the JPA revisions, that perhaps we can use the abatement funding that had been set aside to help supplement the grant funding. Another thing to think about with the home hardening, we've decreased the amount available, which is going to increase the number of people who can apply. And we've also become much more prioritized with the home hardening items. It's basically down to 3 items: gutters, vents, and non-wood attachments for the fences. And that's eliminating some of the most expensive items that we had been funding. And also the most expensive items weren't always the best things for reducing risk of home ignition. And then when it comes to D-space, we've become much more prioritized with the D-space as well. We won't be necessarily authorizing grants for every D-space item. We are focusing in on zone 0 and zone 1, the 2 riskiest areas, because due to the fact that we can't give a grant for absolutely all of the work, we wanted to make sure that the limited dollars that we do have are going exactly where it should go. And it also should increase, this strategy should increase the number of people that actually receive the grants.
Thank you, Mark. So I have one more question and then I'm done. So on the JPA-wide, the fire road assessment inventory, and I know I asked this beforehand, what I noticed was missing was Ross Valley included in that. The list of the agencies that it would cover did not include Ross Valley. And we know we have a bunch of fire roads too. And I know I got back something, well, they would be included, but they weren't included in the actual work plan of the agencies covered. So I want to just tell you, I read every one of those work plans and I loved them. So just, I think we need to write Ross Valley in there, please.
That sounds great. Let's see, I think Santa Fe Fire, Kate Anderson was the author of that, and I'll work with her to make sure that that issue is corrected.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. And again, thank you for responding to my questions earlier. Thank you both.
Any other questions from the board? Fred?
Yeah, I just have a couple. Thanks for all the work, by the way. And I'll just give to you both of them at once. One is, it sounds like the money's there, but is the staffing and the resources there to carry out some of these projects? And then the second question is, do you and Mark feel comfortable with what's in the work plan and that it's doable and realistic?
You'll notice a lot of staff positions in the work plan, and that is because it does take a lot of people to actually plan and implement these projects. I wish they just happen magically without all of the incredible amount of coordination that happens beforehand, but it does require staff. So you'll note some staff positions, some new probably in the work plan this year, including our 2 VMSs who continue to be funded partially through this work plan. So in terms of comfort, I think that, every year is another question mark, how many new projects we're going to have proposed and how many continuing projects we will see and be responsible for continued maintenance and implementation of. That is always going to be a balance. And we're seeing that shift away from newer projects, so many new projects, to maintenance and implementation of existing projects. And I think that is a natural progression, and that reflects where we need to go. So I think that it is doable, and I think that it's going to be a big lift no matter what, but I think it is doable. And I do appreciate the support and staffing up the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority with additional VMSs, et cetera, because it is such a big lift. So thank you all for your support on that this year and last year. Mark, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it well.
Anybody else? Yeah, Tom.
Great work, Ann. Can you tell me the rate of approval of the proposed projects? And does the approval rate vary by zone?
In terms of going through the environmental compliance process and then board approval here before?
Yes, I'm just looking for a feel for whether we're getting projects that are too far afield and we're having to deny them because they don't comply with our goals or because they're not well formulated, and whether that varies from zone to zone. I'd like to know that if there's a particular zone that has a higher rate of success, can the other zones learn from that and submit projects that are more likely to obtain approval?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that working with the different member agencies, at least on the core projects, even proposals that are a bit amorphous in the work plan itself, we dive into the details and really define it and make sure that we know exactly what is being proposed and where and when, so that we can go through the environmental compliance process. And our great environmental contractors who are probably listening in now, Panorama has been, they've been really instrumental in helping define those project definitions, project descriptions for each of those proposals. Of course, one of the zones where that is more challenging is in the west, because we're working in the coastal zone. And as many people in the room are well aware, it is quite challenging to get work done in the coastal zone. We do have one local coastal permit, development permit for vegetation management in the coastal zone, and we're implementing that. One thing you don't see in this work plan is continued kind of planning and environmental compliance for the proposals that we're looking at in the coastal zone. That's only because we're not asking for additional budget. It's happening, and it's happening behind the scenes. And the final work plan will also include a table noting those projects that are continuing, just not asking for additional budgets. No, so not included in the tables there. But yes, we continue to work in the coastal zone at a slower pace to potentially do shaded field breaks and roadside vegetation management, in addition to what you've seen thus far.
Could you express that as a rough percentage of 100 projects proposed? Do we approve 70%, 50%, 20%?
I think of the core projects that required environmental compliance, we've approved well over 30, and I think that's pretty much everything that we could have gotten through up until fairly recently. I haven't tallied up how many new projects need environmental compliance in this work plan. But I would say maybe of the core projects, maybe 80–90%.
The reason I ask is I can sense the burden this places on staff, and I'd like to discourage people from submitting projects that have a low likelihood of being approved, because as you said, even those you comb through methodically, and that consumes a lot of your time. So if we have a feel for what's likely to be approved, we could encourage that and not end up having to go down to a dead end with a project that would ultimately be denied. So it's a staff resources issue.
And at some point in the near future, so we're working on our metrics, our objectives, and we think that the kind of regulatory approval process is going to be reflected in those metrics. So you'll see more discussion around that in the future. Yeah. Mark, is there anything you want to add to that?
Nope, you got it covered.
Okay.
Anybody else? Yes, Catherine.
It's not necessarily a question. This is what has happened as an evolution. with the work plan for Southern Marin. So Commissioner Burke and I are now getting monthly reports on what's being done in terms of a big chart, sheets, what's been spent, what's being done, so that we can interact and keep track. So the question at the end of the year is not, as we had last year, is why didn't you spend this? Well, now we know exactly what's going on. And I think it really is a good interaction between us as board members and our local agencies to keep tracking and then interact with all of you. So, and thank you so much. This was a huge product. And I thank the board too, because they really reading a packet of 748 pages. That's a job. Anyway, thank you.
Anybody else? Bruce?
Incredible job. ATC and ops and all. I'm amazing. I went through the entire work plan, and it's just, I'm so proud of what we're doing. In the presentation, one thing that struck me, Anne, and this is a question, in looking at the work plan and then the pie charts that we're putting up there, I find myself questioning what % of that vegetation management is now maintenance, and that we have, we know we're putting in infrastructure, if you will, and we may not maintain all of it once we do the pathways analysis, but I think it'd be important to continue to chronicle and build a record of maintenance, so that every year, this is not all new, but we're building a burden of maintenance that is going to be substantial. And after 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, I don't know how big that's going to be, but without maintenance, it'll be worthless in another 3 to 5 years. So it's just a suggestion.
Yes, and I will be touching on that in another slide on another agenda item. Thanks for asking that question.
Anyone else? Josh, can you see if there's any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. Any final discussion by the board before we entertain a motion? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the fiscal year 24-25 work plan.
Second.
Josh, can you please call the roll?
Fairfax,
Yes.
Kentfield,
Aye.
Renwood,
Aye.
Corte Madera,
Yes.
Novato, Southern Marin, Bolinas,
Aye.
County Marin,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
San Rafael,
Yes.
Ross, Stinson Beach,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow.
Aye.
Congratulations, Anne. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's huge. Moving on to item number 7B, the fiscal year 24-25 Marin Wildfire budget. Mark.
Before I dip into the budget, I just want to echo Anne's thanks for all of the work from the member agencies. 6 months, you saw the list of meetings, and the passion that our member agencies have to create our fire adapted communities is incredible. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and again, echo the thanks. And I'll start I'm going to do a screen share because I think it's a lot easier to digest our budget while we're all looking at it together. And as Anne mentioned, this budget has been reviewed by the Finance Committee in May 6th, but the initial framework was also reviewed by the Finance Committee back in March. Based on Finance Committee suggestions, we added a couple new columns to this budget so that it's a little easier to compare to last year. The first column is a column that shows our actual to date spending. The second column is the column that what was proposed and approved by the board last year. This middle column, the third column, is what we rolled over from unspent from fiscal year 23 into fiscal year 24. And remember, the vast majority of that rollover was actually from the previous fiscal year. And then this column, the fourth column, is the addition of those two. And then lastly, we have our proposed budget for this year. And to give you an idea how we come up with our total revenue, since we are based on a square footage property tax, our revenue is very stable. So we take the report that we receive from NBS, who manages our tax levy, and they tell us what they anticipate we will receive for 23-24. And then we add the CPI to that. So we added 2.4% to what we figured we were going to get from 23-24. And then we also look at our track record of interest. And as you can see, we've been underestimating the amount of interest that we felt we would receive. We've already received $198,000 this year, so we estimated $200,000 of interest for next year. And that gives us a total revenue of $21,907,664. So then based on the work that Ann has been leading through the ATC and Operations Committee, we can start getting into our core numbers. The top part of these core numbers are basically one-off type projects, and there's only really one thing that it's for rent. It's basically it's only one item that feeds into rent. Whereas when you get down into these bottom categories, several or all the main core projects all feed into these categories. And when you look into our accounting system, you see project codes for every one of our projects. Those project codes align with each one of these categories. So in the spreadsheets that we maintain for each zone, they have that project code. And then in the master spreadsheet, the things that have the right identification code add up into these items here. So that's how we come up with those numbers. And so you see that our total core program is $11,830,138. And then we get into one of our easiest accounting processes, and that is figuring out the 20% for DSpace and a 20% for the local mitigation projects. That just goes back into our member agencies. One thing I do want to note, and that is the abatement fund, is that the member agencies have asked that we discontinue that abatement holdback of 2% of the 20%. And that's because when the original language was written, we thought that perhaps Marin Wildfire would have the authority to do abatements, but we don't. It still resides within the member agencies. And the amount of revenue it's generating really isn't enough for an effective forced abatement program. And our member agencies that do have abatement clauses in their ordinances find that it's far more labor intensive, and they don't get as much bang for their buck on that work, and they're starting to go towards what we're calling a voluntary abatement program. So we anticipate approval of the revision of the JPA that will take away this abatement program, and we anticipate this will be done before we receive our first tax receipt from the county. And we'll be able to eliminate that 87,000 that's being pulled, and it'll be pushed back into the member agencies. And then we have our administrative costs, and we start with this number first. This the 1.3 million is 10% of the core, which is 60% of the overall budget, as the JPA language makes it very clear that we can, or it defines our administrative budget cannot exceed 10% of the core budget. So we start from there and we work back. And over the last several years, we've been averaging only spending 80% of our core budget, or of our admin budget. Therefore, last year, we moved some of the admin unspent into operations. And at the end of fiscal year 23-24, I anticipate that we're going to be able to move even more from admin back up into operations, because we are now getting a much better feel of what our spend rate is for our administrative costs. And down on this bottom piece here, you see what our grant revenue is, and then at the bottom line, any net surplus or deficit that is predicted. And with that, I can turn off my screen share and take any questions. And then if there's a particular question that requires looking at the numbers again, I'd be happy to turn the screen share back on.
Questions from the board? Catherine.
Mark, what line indicates our services with the consultants that were all included in the packet?
It depends on what the services are. So for instance, Willow Labs That would be at the metrics research and the metrics portion of the budget. Where Panorama, who we just renewed as our environmental partner, that would all come out of environmental compliance. If the services are more on the administrative aspect, they would either come out of services and supplies, or they would come out of professional services.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Mark, I think I've heard a couple times you've talked about reserves and rollovers and sort of use those terms sort of interchangeably. Can you sort of go back and describe again when we were talking about the rollover piece and how we have spent the 2 million in reserves? Just provide a little bit more context around that.
So we do have a $3 million strategic reserve, and I do not include that when I'm talking about the unspent from that from our second fiscal year. Just to be clear, when I mentioned rollovers, those really are the monies that we have. We roll over from one project that extends into that next fiscal year, and it really is staying encumbered within the original project. And then our rolling reserve, we developed that rolling reserve in year one on purpose because we had to take a loan from the County of Marin so we can function from July 1 through December because we had no tax revenue until December. So we've established that we want to maintain a rolling reserve of 4 million. So that means that by June 30, we want to have $4 million in our fund balance so that we can continue operations through the end of December when we get our tax dump from the county.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else?
I do see Gabe Paulson with his
Yeah,
hand up.
Gabe. Sorry, Gabe. Hi, Gabe. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, thank you. So Mark, just a couple questions. I was looking at the line item for the shaded fuel break. I think it's 6180, and then also for the metrics development tracking 6145. So if I understand it correctly, 20 cents on every dollar we spend is on shaded fuel breaks. And, this is piggybacking a little bit on Bruce's question about maintenance. I imagine that there's a kind of transition where in the beginning you're just clearing, and then as you have more miles of shaded fuel break, you're in the maintenance mode. And I'm wondering, of that 20%, if we're tracking or if there's a way to, put in the budget, how those two might be different. One is actually clearing, the area, and the other is maintaining that clearance. And then the second question is, really going back to Anne. And by the way, Anne, thank you. That was, amazing. I've read through the workbook, and just the 17 agencies, herding all that, together. I was wondering about the metrics development tracking, how much that's informing the scoring and the decision making for selecting some of these projects. Thanks.
And I'll take Anne's going to talk about some of the GIS that we're developing that's going to allow us to track exactly what you're talking about, maintenance versus initial costs. But just one thought to think about: the lighter the fuel, the more frequent we have to go in and treat because it grows faster. So the cost of treating grass every year at the same spot is really going to stay the same. It's the same effort. We start seeing decreased costs on maintenance when we start getting into brush and then timber. And quite frankly, we're still young enough of an organization that we haven't made too many returns on maintenance wise when it comes to brush and timber. So it's going to take, I think, a few more years for us to realize and be able to compute that the cost difference between maintenance and brush and timber compared to the initial work. And then I think I'll leave it to Anne for the second question.
Yeah, Gabe, if you don't mind, I'll address that question in a future slide.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else from the board? Josh, public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. Any further discussion, or could we entertain a motion, please?
Motion to approve the budget framework.
I'll second it.
Can you please take the roll?
Fairfax,
Yes.
Kenfield, Marinwood,
Aye.
Corte Madera,
Yes.
Novato,
Aye.
Southern Marin,
Aye.
Bolinas,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
San Rafael,
Yes.
Ross, Stinson Beach,
Aye.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow.
Aye.
Wonderful, thank you. Number 9, staff reports. A is the May 2024 finance report for the Marin Wildfire. I think Alyssa might be on. Oh, bye, Bruce. Thank you. Hello there.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Nothing has changed from my report. We're at 60%, projected target of 86% for the year. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board? Catherine?
Hi, Elisa. So really great news on the interest that we earned this year from the county. Terrific. My question is, down on the first page of its accounts payable. That means we owe somebody $378,000. Who is the somebody and why is it so large?
That's a great question. And most of that, I think all of that is DSpace and local payments that we've withheld from a couple agencies whose reporting just doesn't totally satisfy us at the moment. But we're making progress. But we wanted to book it so that the expense matched up, but we have not paid it out to those agencies.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this item?
No hands raised at this time.
Great. Any further discussion by the board? All right. Item B is the fiscal year 2023-24 work plan implementation update. I believe that's Anne again.
Yes, thank you. I'll keep this fairly brief, but I do think I'm going to hit on a couple of the questions that came up previously from Bruce and Gabe. Okay, first I want to note, I'm sorry, Bruce left already. Bruce Coynes organized and moderated a panel discussion with our environmental partners, the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership. That took place on May 14th, and that was really a discussion on forest health practices and fire fuels reduction, vegetation management. And so it was really relevant for the discussion around, how are we taking care of our landscapes with fire in mind, but also all of these other factors. That took place May 14th during the ESP partnership meeting. Big thank you to Bruce for organizing. Speakers included Dr. Malcolm North, Danny Franco, Tori Norville with UC Cooperative Extension, and myself. Malcolm North made a lot of, so he's a researcher with UC Davis and has worked with the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service for a number of years, is a very well-respected expert in these regards. One of the points that he made during his presentation was that these modern large wildfires, the ones that create those pyrocumulonimbus clouds, are releasing the energy equivalent to an atomic bomb. And these are not the fires that we had historically. This is a different time, a different landscape, and so we need to take a more proactive approach to managing our forests. Really powerful discussion. I'm hoping that maybe we can get access to that video because it was recorded. Additional events, we've been busy. We had another field trip, a third field trip, third at least MWPA field trip to the San Rafael San Anselmo Fuel Reduction Zone project. Big thank you to San Rafael Fire, who also coordinated with the contractor who's doing this work currently to make sure that the public could see the plan in action. So the contractor was actively felling eucalyptus trees, and so people could see, they could ask questions, could really see the work in progress. So as you know, we've got a 10-acre pilot project where, we're biting off chunks of the larger work area a little bit at a time. And we've implemented maybe around 5 or 6 acres of the 10 acres so far. People were invited to come and see it in progress. What does the after look like? So this project includes, as you may remember, thinning of eucalyptus, not a clear cut, but reducing the density, really eliminating the trees that are under 10 inches in DBH, and there are a lot of them, leaving the larger trees unless they're particularly hazardous, leaving the native vegetation, so leaving the shrubs and the native trees, and really looking to see what kind of native vegetation comes up in place of these eucalyptus trees. We had over 50 people attending. Thank you to our board members who attended. I think it went really well. It was also live streamed, so we will eventually have that link to a video that'll be on YouTube on the project webpage. So anybody who wasn't able to attend and would have liked to can attend virtually. So I guess that's all I'll say about that. I thought it was a really effective field trip. Really love to get people out in the field taking a look at our work. So again, big group, a lot of really thoughtful questions. We have another field trip coming up. Unfortunately, the registration is closed for this, but this is through Cal Poly. This is our second event with Cal Poly that we have conducted. The first was a webinar a few months ago. This is through the Cal Poly Swanton Pacific Ranches Fuels Management Training Program. They have some Cal Fire funding to do training around the state. A lot of it is really geared towards other professionals, really linking professionals around the state who are struggling with similar fire fuels reduction issues, environmental compliance, and how to do what, where. A lot of their events are virtual and webinars, and some are in person. So we're going to be hosting a few people on Monday out in the coastal areas of Marin to think through fire resilience in coastal communities. So we're looking forward to that. Mark and I will be there Monday. So if you're trying to get a hold of us, we may not have cell signal out there. So speaking of GIS, collecting data, we are working with our GIS contractor to, develop our GIS program and really get a handle on collecting all that data from projects, project implementation, project planning. We've got a lot of data layers. We have a lot of modeling and tools, and we're working to integrate that so they all speak to each other. So while we're doing that, we're also developing a public-facing map that members of the public can go to our website. It'll probably be around the vegetation management portion of the website, where you can go to this map and click on polygons to see what projects are near you. And you'll see photos of the project, hopefully before and after photos of the project, a little blurb about the project, and a link to the project webpage. So we really want to make more of our work more transparent, more easily accessible to the members of the public. So if they see crews working out there, they can take a look and see what kind of work, what project the crews might be working on if they're MWPA. We've been coordinating with different member agencies to get photos, and we'll be reviewing text for the website. So big thank you to Green Info Network and member agencies who are helping with that effort. We're hoping to make that public in the next few weeks. That would be very exciting and a big step forward. Eventually, this site could also include implementation polygons, what areas have already been treated, where crews might be expected to be seen next, etc. So keep an eye out for that in the future. But phase one is just getting it up and running, polygons on a map. So the data collection piece is a big one. We are working with our contractors, Green Info Network, Panorama, and Sequoia, our environmental contractors, and our member agencies. We've been reaching out to land management agencies in the area to think through what data people are collecting, what's working, what's not working, what's too onerous, what's reasonable to expect, and then working with Willow Labs and STI to think through what data we need to be collecting to then keep our models and our data-driven, science-driven tools up to date. So phase one is really just collecting consistent data across the JPA while we're implementing projects. So we've been working with Green Info Network to develop a tool to collect data as member agencies are out there performing the work, what work is happening where, and feeding that into one database where we will have that to share with you and the members of the public, and granting, CAL FIRE, Cal Mapper, grant organizations, and feed our metrics, feed our models and our GIS, and be able to communicate what we're doing where and how effective we are at doing it. So phase one is just consistency across the different member agencies. So you may hear some buzz around your staff about what we're doing and why and where and how it's working. So we've been meeting with member agency staff to think that through and figure out what variables are critical to collect. So a lot of discussion around that. Stay tuned. And I think I will leave it there and answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Josh, can you see if there's any public comment?
No hands raised at this time.
Okay. Supervisor Rice, you had a question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Anne, for all the presentations, and it's really cool to helicopter in here. I would say I've been watching all your meetings virtually as they've been going on over the last few years, but I haven't. So it's very, very cool to be here and see what was concept actually totally operationalized, and everything from the committee work and committee structure to the development of the projects, and then this discussion and talking about how are the monitoring, and not only the consistency with how these projects are being done and keeping that data, but then monitoring and then figuring out what data and what things to be tracking. And I would be really curious to I would love to learn at a later date sort of what are the metrics that are being looked at, and I'm assuming that would be around not the type of treatment, the area, the environmental conditions, the type of brush, et cetera. I mean, your GIS and LiDAR is looking at all that stuff, but I'm thinking there's different costs associated with different topography in terms of treatment. And then it just is, it's going to be so important, and this goes to Gabe's question, and I think Tom, someone else's, this analysis of what it is gonna, the maintenance cycles and the cost of the maintenance cycles and how many new projects and areas can you actually add on over time. And then pointing towards informing what happens when we go out in 2029 or 2028, whenever it is, I can't remember the date, for a re-up of Measure C, because this information we're collecting now and this understanding about what work needs to continue to happen and or new work has to happen will inform what our ask will be of our residents. And frankly, I'm even thinking that it may speak to the expenditure plan itself, because at some point we're going to have a better understanding of what long-term needs are going to be in terms of vegetation management and treatment, and it may not level out across the county. Anyway, there's no question there. But I think I would love to learn more about what are the sort of metrics to be looking at and measuring towards us being as prophetic as possible and prospective in our thinking when we look forward in terms of needs.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fascinating. It's really great.
Thank you.
Good
for that.
job. I'm just getting used to the Mark with that beard. It's kind of
Mhm.
different.
Well, thank you for, being the brain behind this whole concept, you and Jason. So thank you,
Mm.
Katie. It's great.
If I can make one quick you made a lot of really good points there. One is tracking cost, and we do have, in some of our larger projects, we are tracking cost according to kind of polygons and invoices and tracking that over time. And cost does vary wildly from one site to another, depending on topography, what the vegetation is, how accessible it is, et cetera, how you can remove the things that you're cutting, like broom. One of the things that we're working on for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break is taking a look at some areas where broom is growing back. And this isn't final, but we've been working on this internally, where we would want to do maintenance and choose areas to maintain, to pull that broom every 1, 2, and 3 years, and then look at cost over time. So broom to pull it after year 1 is pretty quick and easy in theory, but going back every year might be pretty costly. going back every 3 years, it's going to reseed and it's going to feed the seed bed. And maybe that is more expensive long-term. We're not really sure, but we're going to take a look and see if we can do a better job estimating what the future maintenance costs are in our project areas. It's a tough one to noodle out, but we're going to be diving into that and using our GIS and the data collection to help track future costs as well as current.
Yeah, that is, I mean, to be thinking about broom and broom cycles over 1 and 2 and 3 years seems just like way in the weeds, no pun intended. But if we don't do this right, it'll all be for naught because that broom is all going to come back. Those seeds are there for, you know, how long is that seed bank hanging out? Yeah. Thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, and I just have another question around the work plan, thinking ahead for next year and using the work around the data analysis. Are you anticipating having the same type of schedule for next year in terms of work plan development?
Every year I start setting deadlines a little earlier for the next year so that it's not such a challenge at the end, especially if there are potential changes to budgets, to core programs, et cetera. So I'll probably set the deadlines just a little earlier next year as I did this year, and I will probably do the following year as well. It's a big lift, and when there are changes in the 11th hour, it can really shake things up. So yeah.
And I'm thinking with the introduction now of looking at it differently, bringing in more of the data aspects, we got to figure out the right timing because that could be a whole year just doing that work and not
Yes.
going to the work plan.
Yes, and that's why we're going to dive into that this summer and fall before the season of developing the next work plan even begins. Yeah, absolutely
you.
agree.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Catherine?
To compliment you, Supervisor Rice, because the thing that's happened in my neighborhood, this is testimony here, is that I live in Tam Valley. There's a ton of brush. What's going on is the neighbors are really doing it. They're participating. They know how to get online, go to MWPA and look for grants. They know how to help each other out. And of course, that's also means we're getting on each other's case. You better clean up your yard because I cleaned up mine, and all of that. But it's the public response, not just, it's our program, which I think you envisioned. I remember us doing this at the county supervisors, at the office before Measure C. So it's, in my opinion, we have an excellent staff, excellent, everybody's here. The board is great, but the public response just makes me so proud of this whole effort. So thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to number 9, committee reports. Fire Safe Marin. Rich, are you there?
It's actually going to be Meg McCabe today, and we just moved her over as a panelist.
Great. Welcome, Meg.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm Meg McCabe, and good afternoon, board members. Realizing that today was going to be a really full agenda, we normally would begin by giving you highlights of the activities that we've done in the past couple months. And instead, I'm going to direct you to the report that we submitted and is included in your packet. And I'm going to really cut to the chase and talk about an exciting collaboration that we have been working on with Marin Fire, with the agencies that make up the alliance, with San Rafael Fire and with Fireside, to really focus our efforts on getting residents to engage with the home evaluation program. It's a big investment on everyone's part, and we really need residents to participate in the evaluations, to open their reports, and to do the work once they get those reports. And we're not really satisfied with the amount of engagement or the open rate, frankly, of the reports to date. So we've been asked to all come together and participate in that effort. And I want to give a shout out to Charlotte Jourdain for coordinating this collaborative effort. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I just want you to share a few of the, let me see. there we go. This is the big bold look of the campaign. You'll note that all of the messages and communications that go out with residents will now have consistent terminology. They'll all have this icon on it with the house with the magnifying glass and many of the same elements, so that residents will be able to recognize that how all of the different pieces of the home evaluation program come together. This is now the website, the MWPA's website, where people come to actually get their wildfire risk report. The first touch the residents will see will be the door hangers that go up on the doors after the home evaluations. And these again will have the same look. They're in Spanish, they're in English. This is the one on the far left is the front of it, which is very similar to what it was prior, but it now has all of the same terminology throughout all of the areas. On the back, it has a simple explanation about the pieces of the program, the home evaluation itself, that fact that residents need to go get their report, and that the reports are also available to be mailed to them, and they're available in English and in Spanish. And then the note that the work needs to happen in conjunction with the report. We've pulled the icons and the terminology through also the communications, the emails that are sent out through Fireside, and they have communications before, right after, and a number of days. They continue to remind people to come back to the report, and we're building that all in. And then Fire Safe Marin is going to launch a large and multi-dimensional campaign starting mid-June and going through mid-July, when in the height of the evaluation, as the inspectors are out in the neighborhoods. And we will have a large print presence, a digital presence, outdoor signs, bus stops on the back of buses, at the ferry terminals. Our newsletter goes out to 13,000 people. We'll have a large and robust social media presence. We have collaborations with our local radio stations. Here's a few of the images that show you what the print ads will look like in full page in the IJ and in Point Reyes Light. And we will have our digital ads going out in streaming services, and also our banner ads that will be everywhere that our residents go. It follows them around online, basically. And these are all in Spanish and in English. And once again, whether something comes up in Spanish or in English, it is a matter of how people consume their news and their media. And so we have those resources available. We will have them on the back of buses and on the bus stops, as you see. And we also will be putting up signs in people's neighborhoods as we're coordinating with the defensible space plan. As the inspectors are going out in the neighborhoods, we're moving these street signs and yard signs around the neighborhoods so that people will be seeing it as the inspectors are out in the neighborhoods. They'll get the notice to open your report. And we're kind of thinking of this as the wave of yellow that we're anticipating. It's going to be drawing a lot of attention to the reports themselves. And I think it's going to really help residents to understand that who the inspectors are, they're out, and the connection to the MWPA, and what is expected and anticipated from the residents' engagement with it. So as I mentioned, we're going to have a large social media campaign coordinated with this, and we would really like to ask all of you, when you see anything out there in social media, to please like it, share it, comment upon it, because this really helps the algorithm of those individual posts to reach a much broader reach. And we'd ask that all of you ask your the town manager to also share our anything to do with the home evaluation reports, because Alone, Fire Safe Marin can reach its subscribers on social media of about 7,000. But together, we counted it up and we could, with our joint subscribers, we could reach 168,000 with any of these messages. So we really are asking that all of you join in on this. And we're anticipating that this is going to have a big impact and a big splash as a big collaborative, timed and consolidated and consistent message to the public.
Great. Thank you, Meg. Questions from the board? Anybody online for the public?
No hands raised at this time.
Rachel?
Hi, Meg. Thank you. Great program. I love the yellow. I've started to see some signs. I don't remember where, but I started to see some signs. Is there any distinction between that these are homeowners? Because those living in multi-dwelling units would not receive a report. So is there some clarification so people don't, I mean, it seems obvious, right? But it's only for homeowners.
This is really it is to back up and support the home evaluation program. So it is for everyone that would get a home evaluation report. We have other campaigns that we'll be running, as we always do, for the evacuation and for the personal safety and for all of the other education programs. This is really to get behind the home evaluation program as, you know, one of the priority areas of residents doing the work that they need to do around their homes. So yes, it is for primarily for homeowners, although I suppose renters and so forth that do take care of the work themselves would also be participating in that.
And if I can add in, each of the member agencies that are managing inspections are handling multifamily dwellings in a different way. And parts of it are a struggle on how to organize it. Parts of it are who should be the recipient exactly of the message, exactly as you said. So having a couple different ways across the JPA on how we're handling multifamily dwellings is going to kind of help us to create the best way to go about it.
Great, thank you. And is there a centralized schedule so we know when the inspectors will be in certain areas, or is that handled by jurisdiction?
So the D Space Alliance, so for the Central West and Southern zones, we help where we publish a schedule actually in the next Fire Safe or the last Fire Safe Marin newsletter. I'm not sure. And then it would be up for San Rafael or Novato to share their schedule. And I see Jen Guana is raising her hand, so maybe she has more info on that. So I'll promote her over to the panel as well.
Oh. Hi, board members. I'm Jen Gauna. So what I do know about the scheduling, ahead of schedules, there is a communication piece that is sent to cities and towns of those areas that they're going to be doing home inspections. So for example, last week there were, I don't know if it was San Anselmo in some of those areas, those town managers would have gotten an email from MWPA saying, we're going to be doing inspections in these areas and neighborhoods. Will you please help put this in your newsletter? And then, so that is happening.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And this marks the first time that we really collaborated with that and trying to time our advertising and our messaging with this. So this again represents yet another level of collaboration. And you know, it's one of these things as I keep hearing the talk of all of the programs of the MWPA coming together and actually being so much more effective as we all work together and we all understand what each other is doing and amplifying the work of one another. It's much more powerful together.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
And if I may say just one more thing. So part of the significance of this collaborative work that we have been doing with increasing resident engagement with that report, I think it really reflects the original vision of the MWPA to be working together and to standardize messaging. And while this is an ad campaign, a pretty big blown up one, there are so many other elements that have the same branding and coloring so that residents can connect the dots and they can connect it to MWPA as one of their big programs. So we showed you and focused on the advertising component of it, but there's the online report that has the house icon and the similar key terms. So for example, we're referring to it as the wildfire risk report. Previously, it's been called the defensible space report, the home evaluation report, many different things. And so coming together and agreeing on some key terms, we're all using the same language. So you'll see that on the website, the communication pieces, as Meg had said, these direct mail pieces and emails. So there's a lot more just beyond, not just the advertising piece of it.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I think we already did public comment. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to B and C. And do we have any ATC or Ops Committee people?
We don't, because of the Marin County Fire Chiefs retreat that's happening today. Neither the chair nor the vice chair of either committee were able to join, but I want to quickly thank Chair Ruben Martin with Central Marin Fire for his leadership on the ATC this year, and Vice Chair Fred Hilliard with Southern Marin Fire for his help this year as well. And then for the Operations Committee, I'd love to thank Chief Bill Tyler with Novato Fire for his leadership, and Todd Cusmano with Mill Valley. So great work by all, and really appreciated all of their time and effort.
Thank you. Any board questions on those two items? Any public comment, Josh, on those two, Ops and ATC?
No hands raised at this time.
Let's move on to item number 10. MWPA Board Officer Election and Succession Process.
It's that time of year again. So as the staff report lists, any board member that would be interested in being the next vice president, with the somewhat assumption that the Rachel would ascend to president, but we have that one little tiny clause in there. Someone really wanted to be president, rather that they could, but I doubt that will happen. Please send me a letter stating your desire to be the next vice president, and then we will follow the process as outlined in the policy in the coming months.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Any questions? Public comment?
No hands raised at the time.
Great. And then there's a bunch of items that we are just acknowledging. Items B through I.
The many minutes of the many meetings that we've had.
Yeah. Thank you for providing all of those. Number 11, board member requests regarding future agenda items. Anybody? All right. With that, we are adjourned, and I will see you all on June 20th at our next board meeting. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.